The prelude to civil war, Rome's fragile republic. The shadows of the Ides of March. The torches blazed in the Roman Forum, casting flickering shadows on the walls of the Senate House. It was the evening after the assassination of Julius Caesar, and the streets of Rome teemed with anxiety, whispers, and conflicting ambitions. The dagger thrusts that ended Caesar's life had not just struck a man but had pierced the fragile heart of the Republic. In the chaos that followed, Rome teetered on the edge of oblivion. As the conspirators celebrated their so-called liberation of the Republic, the city's citizens were anything but jubilant. The people mourned Caesar, who had been both a tyrant and a benefactor. His death ignited the fuse of a civil war that would engulf Rome in flames. But how did this monumental fracture begin? What forces drove the players on this chaotic stage? And what lessons can we draw from the fragile balance of power that crumbled so dramatically? Let us delve into this tale of ambition, betrayal, and war that shaped the fate of Western civilization. The death of Caesar and its immediate fallout. Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March, 44 BCE, was intended to restore the Republic to its former glory. Yet the conspirators Brutus, Cassius, and their allies underestimated the extent of Caesar's influence and the power vacuum his death would create. Their failure to anticipate the wrath of Caesar's supporters and the ambitions of his successors set the stage for chaos. Initially, the Senate attempted to maintain order by declaring an amnesty for the conspirators while simultaneously legitimizing Caesar's reforms. This uneasy compromise did little to pacify the population. The people, especially the plebeians, had adored Caesar for his populist policies. His will, which left money and land to the citizens of Rome, turned him into a martyr and further inflamed public sentiment against the assassins. Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant, emerged as a key figure in the immediate aftermath. A consummate orator and politician, Antony seized the moment by delivering a masterful funeral oration. His speech transformed public mourning into fury, compelling the people to rise against the liberators. The conspirators, overwhelmed by the tide of hostility, fled Rome, leaving the city's political future in the hands of Antony and, unexpectedly, a young man named Octavian, the unlikely heir. Gaius Octavius, later known as Octavian, was an unassuming 19-year-old student in Apollonia when news of Caesar's death reached him. Caesar's will named Octavian as his adopted son and primary heir, a revelation that shocked both Rome and the young man himself. Despite his youth and inexperience, Octavian displayed remarkable resolve. He immediately set out for Italy, determined to claim his inheritance and assert his place in the unfolding drama. Octavian's arrival in Rome was met with skepticism. Many dismissed him as a mere boy, unworthy of Caesar's mantle. Antony, in particular, viewed him as a potential rival and sought to undermine him. Yet, Octavian's shrewdness soon became apparent. He won the loyalty of Caesar's veterans and cultivated alliances with influential senators like Cicero, who saw in him a useful tool against Antony. This period marked the beginning of a complex and uneasy relationship between Octavian and Antony. While they shared a common cause in avenging Caesar's death, their mutual distrust and competing ambitions foreshadowed the inevitable conflict that would erupt between them. The rise of factionalism. The political landscape of Rome in the months following Caesar's assassination was a volatile tapestry of alliances and enmities. On one side stood Antony, who sought to consolidate power by securing control of Caesar's legions and leveraging his position as consul. On the other side were the Senate's leading figures, including Cicero, who viewed Antony as a threat to the Republic. Octavian, meanwhile, positioned himself as the champion of Caesar's legacy. He courted the support of the plebeians and the military, using Caesar's name and memory to bolster his legitimacy. His efforts bore fruit as thousands of veterans flocked to his banner, drawn by promises of land and wealth. The Senate, eager to weaken Antony, reluctantly allied with Octavian. Cicero, in particular, saw the young heir as a counterbalance to Antony's growing power. He delivered a series of scathing speeches known as the Philippics, denouncing Antony as a tyrant and urging the Senate to take decisive action. These speeches galvanized opposition to Antony but also deepened the divisions within the Republic. The seeds of civil war. By late 44 BCE, Rome was on the brink of war. Antony's efforts to secure the governorship of Cisalpine Gaul brought him into direct conflict with Decimus Brutus, one of Caesar's assassins who controlled the province. The Senate, siding with Brutus, ordered Antony to relinquish his claim. Antony, defiant, marched his legions north, setting the stage for a confrontation that would ignite the flames of civil war. Octavian, now commanding a formidable army, found himself at a crossroads. Though nominally aligned with the Senate, he harbored deep resentment toward the body for its role in Caesar's death. His ultimate goal, to avenge his adoptive father and secure his own power, placed him on a collision course with both Antony and the liberators. Lessons from the collapse of the Republic. The events leading to the Battle of Mutina reveal much about the fragility of political systems under the strain of personal ambition and public unrest. The Republic's institutions, designed to balance power among competing interests, proved incapable of containing the ambitions of men like Caesar, Antony, and Octavian. Each exploited the system's weaknesses, turning its mechanisms against itself. Historically, this period underscores the dangers of concentrating power in the hands of individuals who prioritize personal gain over collective stability. The collapse of the Republic was not the inevitable result of Caesar's assassination, but the culmination of decades of systemic decay and unchecked ambition. Modern readers and viewers can draw parallels between Rome's struggles and contemporary political challenges, reminding us of the importance of vigilance in safeguarding democratic institutions. A world on the brink. As Rome hurtled toward civil war, the lines between friend and foe blurred. Alliances shifted, loyalties wavered, and the stakes grew ever higher. The Battle of Mutina, which we will explore in the next chapter, marked the beginning of a conflict that would transform the Roman world. Yet, even as the Republic crumbled, its legacy endured, shaping the political and cultural foundations of the West. Stay tuned as we delve into the next phase of this epic saga, where swords clash and destinies are forged in the crucible of war. The road to Mutina, marching toward chaos, the gathering storm, the soft morning light of a Roman spring filtered through the trees as legions assembled, their polished armor glinting with determination. Yet beneath the disciplined facade of the marching soldiers lay an empire divided. The assassination of Julius Caesar had opened a chasm in the Roman Republic, splitting loyalties and unraveling the tenuous threads that held the political landscape together. As the Senate scrambled to assert its authority, power-hungry generals maneuvered like chess masters, each seeking an advantage in a rapidly shifting game. This was the prelude to one of Rome's most consequential confrontations, the Siege of Mutina. But how did Rome reach this tipping point? This chapter unravels the critical events and key figures who shaped the road to Mutina. From Antony's ambitious gambits to Octavian's calculated risks, we delve into the complexities of the political alliances and betrayals that set the stage for civil war. Antony's ambitions. Mark Antony, now one of the most powerful men in Rome, understood the precariousness of his position. As consul, he wielded considerable influence, but his authority was far from absolute. Caesar's death had left a void, and Antony's initial attempts to position himself as Caesar's true successor met with resistance on multiple fronts. The question of provinces. Antony's immediate objective was to secure a governorship that would guarantee him both political immunity and military resources. His eyes turned toward Cisalpine Gaul, a strategically vital province governed by Decimus Brutus, one of Caesar's assassins. By controlling this region, Antony could command an army and exert influence over Italy itself. Antony's maneuver to wrest control of Cisalpine Gaul began with a bold demand. He petitioned the Senate to transfer the governorship to him, citing his consulship and the need for stability. The Senate, wary of Antony's growing power, refused. Undeterred, Antony turned to the People's Assembly, where his populist rhetoric found more fertile ground. He argued that as Caesar's loyal lieutenant, it was his right to oversee the province. The assembly's approval emboldened him, but it also deepened the divisions within Rome. The army's role. Key to Antony's strategy was the loyalty of Caesar's veteran legions. These soldiers, hardened by years of campaigns, remained a formidable force. Antony's ability to command their allegiance would prove critical. However, loyalty among the ranks was not uniform. Octavian's calculated efforts to win over these veterans, promising rewards and invoking Caesar's legacy, posed a direct threat to Antony's plans. From youth to power. While Antony consolidated his power, Octavian emerged as a cunning and ambitious rival. Though only 19, Octavian demonstrated a remarkable ability to navigate Rome's turbulent political waters. His adoption as Caesar's heir gave him legitimacy, but his youth and inexperience initially led many to underestimate him. Winning the veterans. Octavian's first significant move was to appeal to Caesar's veterans. Traveling through Italy, he sought out military camps and settlements, invoking Caesar's name and promising the riches outlined in his will. These efforts bore fruit as thousands of soldiers swore allegiance to him, providing Octavian with a private army that rivaled Antony's forces. An uneasy alliance with the Senate. Octavian's relationship with the Senate was one of mutual convenience. Cicero, a leading senator and staunch opponent of Antony, saw in Octavian a potential ally. In his series of fiery philippics, Cicero lambasted Antony and rallied the Senate to support Octavian as a counterweight. Octavian, though distrustful of the Senate's motives, recognized the opportunity to bolster his position. Their alliance, however, was built on fragile trust and would later unravel. The Senate's role and the balance of power. The Senate's response to the escalating tensions was emblematic of its declining influence. Once the cornerstone of Republican governance, the Senate now struggled to maintain control over Rome's fractious factions. Divided loyalties. Many senators viewed Antony as a threat to the Republic, aligning themselves with Decimus Brutus in Cisalpine Gaul. Yet, their support for Octavian was not wholehearted. They saw him as a useful tool but feared his potential to become another Caesar. This internal discord hampered their ability to present a unified front, allowing Antony and Octavian to exploit their divisions. Mobilizing forces. Under Cicero's guidance, the Senate authorized the recruitment of legions to counter Antony's advances. The newly elected consuls, Hirtius and Pansa, were tasked with leading these forces. Their mission: to relieve Decimus Brutus at Mutina and check Antony's ambitions. This marked a significant escalation in the conflict, as both sides prepared for war. The march to Mutina. The events leading to the siege of Mutina unfolded with a sense of grim inevitability. Antony, determined to claim Cisalpine Gaul, marched his legions north. His advance was met with resistance from Decimus Brutus, who fortified himself in the city of Mutina. As Antony's forces encircled the city, the stage was set for a showdown that would determine the fate of the Republic. Antony's strategy. Antony's approach to the siege reflected his military acumen. He sought to isolate Mutina, cutting off supplies and reinforcements. His army, composed of seasoned veterans, was well-equipped for prolonged operations. However, Antony's reliance on force alienated potential allies, further polarizing the conflict. Octavian's calculated moves. Meanwhile, Octavian positioned his forces strategically, coordinating with the Senate's consuls. His goal was twofold: to undermine Antony's position while solidifying his own authority. This delicate balancing act required both military prowess and political finesse. The fragile Republic. The road to Mutina highlights the fragility of the Roman Republic during this tumultuous period. The assassination of Caesar did not restore stability. Instead, it unleashed a torrent of ambition and rivalry. Antony and Octavian, though ostensibly aligned in their loyalty to Caesar's memory, pursued paths that placed them at odds with each other and with the Senate. The Senate's inability to adapt to the changing political landscape further exacerbated the crisis. Its reliance on figures like Cicero and the consuls to counter Antony's ambitions proved insufficient in the face of military realities. Ultimately, The Republic's institutions were ill-equipped to manage the competing forces that threatened its survival. Toward the breaking point, as legions converged on Mutina, the tensions that had simmered since Caesar's assassination reached a boiling point. The siege marked a turning point in the struggle for Rome's future, with Antony, Octavian, and the Senate locked in a deadly contest of wills. Yet, even as the Republic teetered on the brink of collapse, the seeds of a new political order were being sown. The story of Mutina is one of ambition and betrayal, of calculated risks and unforeseen consequences. It is a tale that continues to resonate, offering timeless lessons on the dangers of unchecked power and the fragility of political systems. In the next chapter, we will delve into the siege itself, examining the strategies, battles, and outcomes that shaped the course of Roman history. The clash at Mutina, Rome's decisive battle. The storm breaks. The clatter of swords echoed through the valley as Roman legions marched toward their fateful confrontation. Mutina, a modest city in northern Italy, was now the epicenter of a conflict that would decide the future of Rome. The lines were drawn. Mark Antony, an ambitious consul seeking to dominate the Republic, faced an alliance of Senate-backed forces led by Octavian, Caesar's young heir, and the consuls Hirtius and Pansa. As the siege tightened around Decimus Brutus in Mutina, the tensions that had been simmering for months erupted into one of the most consequential battles in Roman history. This chapter recounts the clash at Mutina, exploring the strategies, personalities, and chaos that defined this pivotal moment. It also delves into the broader implications of the battle, shedding light on the shifting dynamics of power in the waning days of the Republic. Antony's Gambit. By early 43 BCE, Mark Antony had encircled Mutina, determined to force Decimus Brutus into submission. Antony's strategy was clear: isolate the city, starve its defenders, and consolidate his hold over Cisalpine Gaul. He understood that control of the province was crucial not only for its strategic location but also for the political legitimacy it conferred. Tactics and challenges. Antony's forces constructed siege works around Mutina, cutting off supplies and reinforcements. However, this approach was not without its risks. Prolonged sieges were costly, both in resources and morale. Antony's army, composed largely of Caesar's veterans, was formidable, but cracks began to show as defections to Octavian's camp undermined their cohesion. Decimus Brutus, the besieged. Inside Mutina, Decimus Brutus, one of Caesar's assassins, prepared for a desperate defense. While his position was precarious, Brutus' legions were seasoned fighters. He relied on the city's fortifications and the hope that Senate-backed reinforcements would arrive in time to relieve the siege. Octavian and the consuls. The Senate's response to Antony's siege was to mobilize a relief force under the command of the consuls Hirtius and Pansa, with Octavian joining as an essential but uneasy ally. This coalition represented a fragile alliance of interests, bound together by their shared opposition to Antony. Octavian's growing army. By now, Octavian had amassed a substantial force, including 2 legions of Caesar's veterans. His appeals to loyalty and promises of wealth continued to draw soldiers to his cause. Despite his youth, Octavian's leadership and charisma earned him the respect of his troops, laying the foundation for his eventual dominance. The role of Cicero. In Rome, Cicero's fiery rhetoric kept public support for the Senate's cause alive. His Philippics, a series of speeches lambasting Antony, framed the conflict as a battle for the Republic's survival. Cicero's efforts galvanized the Senate but also deepened the polarization within Roman politics. The Battle of Forum Gallorum. The first major engagement occurred near Forum Gallorum, where Antony's forces clashed with Pansa's advancing legions. Antony, seeking to exploit his interior position, ambushed the consul's army as it marched through marshy terrain. The ambush, Antony's strategy, was audacious. He divided his forces, sending a contingent under his brother Lucius to harass Octavian's camp while leading his main force to intercept Pansa. The narrow, swampy roads of Forum Gallorum proved ideal for an ambush. Antony's veteran legions struck with ferocity, catching Pansa's troops off guard. A costly victory, Though Antony's forces initially overwhelmed Pansa's inexperienced levies, the arrival of Hirtius with the Martian Legion turned the tide. The Martian Legion, famed for its discipline and loyalty, repelled Antony's advance, inflicting heavy casualties. By the day's end, both sides had suffered significant losses, and Pansa was mortally wounded. The battle's outcome was inconclusive, but it set the stage for a decisive confrontation. The Second Battle of Mutina. Just days after Forum Gallorum, the opposing forces clashed again near Mutina. This time, the stakes were higher, and the battle more decisive. The battlefield, the open plains outside Mutina, provided ample space for maneuvering, favoring Antony's cavalry. However, Octavian and Hirtius's forces, bolstered by reinforcements, were well prepared. The consuls coordinated their legions with precision, aiming to exploit Antony's divided attention between the siege and the battlefield. The climax, as the battle raged, Hirtius personally led a charge into Antony's camp, seeking to break his opponent's morale. The attack was partially successful but came at a high cost. Hirtius was killed in the fighting. Meanwhile, Octavian's troops exploited gaps in Antony's lines, forcing him to retreat. The loss of his camp, along with the symbolic eagles of his legions, dealt a severe blow to Antony's cause. A Pyrrhic victory. The Senate's forces emerged victorious at Mutina, but the cost was steep. Both consuls were dead, leaving Octavian as the de facto leader of the coalition. Decimus Brutus was relieved but found his position increasingly tenuous as Octavian refused to yield command of his legions. Antony's retreat. Antony's retreat marked a turning point in the conflict. Though his forces were battered, he regrouped with allies like Lepidus, consolidating his power for future confrontations. His resilience underscored the difficulty of eradicating such a determined adversary. Octavian's ascendancy. For Octavian, the victory at Mutina was both a triumph and a stepping stone. The deaths of Hirtius and Pansa left him in command of a substantial army, giving him the leverage to negotiate on his terms. His growing authority alarmed the Senate, which increasingly viewed him as a potential threat. The cost of ambition. The battles at Mutina illustrate the brutal realities of civil war. While nominally fought for the Republic's survival, the conflict was driven by the personal ambitions of its key players. Antony's tenacity, Octavian's cunning, and the Senate's desperation created a volatile mix that reshaped Rome's political landscape. The loss of experienced leaders like Hirtius and Pansa further destabilized the Republic, leaving a vacuum that ambitious figures like Octavian were eager to fill. The symbolism of Mutina, a battle fought to preserve the Republic but resulting in its further decline, serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of political systems. The turning point. The clash at Mutina was more than a battle. It was a defining moment in the struggle for Rome's future. It exposed the vulnerabilities of the Republic, the ambitions of its leaders, and the shifting dynamics of power that would ultimately lead to the rise of the empire. As Antony regrouped and Octavian consolidated his position, the stage was set for the next phase of the civil war. The alliances formed and broken in the aftermath of Mutina would shape the destiny of Rome and its people. Stay tuned as we explore the fallout from this dramatic confrontation and the path to the triumvirate that would change the course of history. Aftermath and legacy. Rome reborn through chaos. The ashes of victory. The sun rose over the blood-soaked fields near Mutina, casting long shadows over a fractured republic. The Senate's forces had claimed victory, but the triumph was hollow. The deaths of consuls Hirtius and Pansa left the coalition in disarray, while Antony's retreat signaled not defeat, but a regrouping. Amid the chaos, one figure began to emerge with undeniable clarity. Octavian, the young heir of Caesar, whose calculated moves would soon redefine Rome's destiny. This chapter explores the consequences of the battles at Mutina, tracing the political, military, and social upheavals that followed. It examines the personal ambitions and alliances that shaped the next chapter of Rome's transformation and offers insights into the enduring lessons of this tumultuous period. The power vacuum in Rome. The deaths of Hirtius and Pansa created an immediate crisis for the Senate. Without their leadership, the coalition against Antony faltered. Decimus Brutus, the supposed beneficiary of the victory at Mutina, found himself increasingly isolated as Octavian refused to relinquish control of his legions. The Senate's dilemma. Cicero and the Senate faced a difficult choice: rely on Octavian, whose growing power threatened their authority, or risk further chaos by alienating him. Their decision to recognize Decimus Brutus as the official commander of the legions backfired spectacularly. Octavian's troops, fiercely loyal to him and to Caesar's memory, rejected the Senate's orders outright. Octavian's strategic moves. Octavian's refusal to yield to the Senate marked a turning point. He began consolidating his position, portraying himself as the true defender of Caesar's legacy. His correspondence with Antony's allies, including Lepidus and Plancus, revealed his long-term strategy: to position himself as the indispensable center of power in a fractured republic. Antony's resurgence. Though battered and humiliated, Antony was far from defeated. Retreating to Transalpine Gaul, he regrouped with Lepidus, whose loyalty proved instrumental. Together, they rebuilt their forces, creating a powerful bloc that threatened the Senate's tenuous hold on power. The alliance with Lepidus. Lepidus' support gave Antony access to additional legions and critical resources. This alliance was both pragmatic and precarious, as Lepidus sought to assert his influence in the shifting political landscape. Antony's charisma and military acumen, however, ensured that he remained the dominant partner. Rebranding the struggle, Antony masterfully reframed his cause, presenting himself as a champion of Rome's traditions and a counterweight to the Senate's perceived overreach. This narrative resonated with soldiers and citizens disillusioned by the Republic's endless infighting. The formation of the Second Triumvirate. Recognizing that further conflict would only weaken their respective positions, Octavian and Antony brokered an uneasy truce. Along with Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate in 43 BCE, a political alliance that would dominate Rome for years to come. The Treaty of Brundisium. The triumvirs divided Rome's territories among themselves. Antony controlled the east, Octavian the west, and Lepidus Africa. This arrangement, while ostensibly balanced, sowed the seeds for future discord. Each man viewed the alliance as a means to an end rather than a permanent solution. The proscriptions. One of the triumvirate's most infamous actions was the proscriptions, a brutal campaign of political purges targeting their enemies. Cicero, whose Philippics had vilified Antony, was among the most notable victims. These purges consolidated the triumvir's power but left a legacy of fear and resentment. The decline of the Senate. The events following Mutina marked the final erosion of the Senate's authority. Once the heart of Republican governance, the Senate now served as little more than a rubber stamp for the triumvir's decisions. The loss of public trust. The Senate's inability to manage the crisis effectively alienated both the populace and the military. Its reliance on figures like Cicero and Decimus Brutus, who ultimately failed to deliver lasting stability, undermined its credibility. A symbol of decline. By ceding power to the triumvirs, the Senate effectively acknowledged its own impotence. This shift paved the way for the eventual rise of imperial authority under Octavian, who would later become Augustus. The lessons of Mutina. The aftermath of the battles at Mutina offers profound insights into the dynamics of power, ambition, and political systems. The conflict highlighted the dangers of factionalism and the fragility of institutions in the face of unchecked ambition. The role of ambition. Figures like Octavian and Antony exemplified the dual-edged nature of ambition. While their determination and strategic acumen enabled them to rise to power, it also fueled the conflict that tore the Republic apart. The collapse of consensus. The Republic's decline was not solely the result of individual ambition. It stemmed from a broader failure to maintain a consensus on governance. The competing visions for Rome's future, a traditional republic versus a centralized authority, proved irreconcilable. Octavian's ascendancy. In the years following Mutina, Octavian's star continued to rise. His calculated moves ensured that he remained a step ahead of his rivals, ultimately positioning him as Rome's unchallenged leader. From heir to emperor, Octavian's transformation from Caesar's adopted son to Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, was marked by both political brilliance and ruthless pragmatism. His ability to navigate the complexities of the post-Mutina landscape set him apart from his contemporaries. The birth of the empire. The Republic's collapse gave rise to the Roman Empire, a political structure that would endure for centuries. Octavian's consolidation of power laid the foundation for this new era, reshaping Rome's identity and legacy. Rome reborn. The aftermath of Mutina was a crucible of transformation. What began as a struggle to preserve the Republic ended with its irrevocable decline and the emergence of a new order. The ambitions of Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus reshaped Rome, forging an empire from the ashes of civil war. This chapter in Roman history serves as a testament to the resilience of political systems and the enduring impact of individual ambition. As we reflect on these events, we are reminded of the delicate balance between stability and change, and the enduring lessons of Rome's rise and fall.